Cool.
All right. Well, we're live. Folks, thanks so much for joining us. This is episode 8 of Coaches Collective. And please allow me to introduce my esteemed guest for tonight. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. So we got we got Christopher Bean, right? We got and of course myself, Memphis Beach, as part of the Coaches Collective. We have 3 guests tonight, and that includes Jay White, Gabe White, no relation, and Neil Widener. So, folks, thanks a bunch for coming, guys. Let's see. So, Chris, should we go around the? Should we let everybody go around the horn and give a quick introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. I would start with the guests, so for sure.
Yeah. So, how about we start with, since you've been on this environment before, Neil? How about we start with you? Yeah.
I was going to say we should start with Gabe so we have the best shooter, but hey, Gabe, how's it going? I didn't get to say hi to you earlier, man. I miss you.
Whatever. Good deal. Hi, everybody.
I'm Neil Widener. I'm from Active Self-Protection. I do the marketing and everything for our YouTube channels and our app and all of that. And then I'm the I guess in charge of all the training that we travel around and do. When we travel to instruct, I'm the one that typically lines up all of those details, and then I travel with John and we teach our pistol classes.
Fantastic. And if you could follow us up, Gabe. Oh no, I think we might have lost Gabe.
Sure. My name's Gabe White.
Yeah.
Well, can you? Yeah. Okay.
We got
All
you.
right. Okay. Great. I'm on cell service,
Yeah,
so hopefully that doesn't do anything bad. My name is Gabe White. I train locally. I work for a sheriff's office out west that has nothing to do with me personally for the national training, but we have a range out there that I work at the range and teach classes there in their program, and then and that's to the public, not to the deputies. And then I also teach nationally, and I'm gonna be seeing Memphis in a couple of days in Memphis. So. Yeah, and really, I would say that I think there is no such thing as being too good at fighting for your life with a pistol. So there's a whole lot of work to do there. Because shooting is hard enough already, and as much as we can help people be better at that, I think that's probably good.
Right on. Yeah, I totally agree. Jay, how about you? How about you get an introduction?
You're on mute.
There's a mute button.
Happen.
Hey guys, there's a mute button down there, so make sure you hit the mute button before you start talking. All right. Yeah. So Jay White, I own and operate Sinistrom Training out here in the Maryland and DMV area. We kind of cover a little bit of everything, focusing on Maryland concealed carry. Currently offering some fundamentals of speed and accuracy on pistol, starting carbine, functional carry classes, just trying to get guys repetitions from their concealed carry gear that they work with every day. Not a lot of Maryland ranges give you the opportunity to draw from a holster, liabilities and stuff like that. So trying to provide a space to give people the opportunity to come and train and do that. So, yeah.
Right on. Yeah, let's see. I think we lost Gabe as well. So
Looks like he's trying to pop back in.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of those nights, but we're going to push through.
Yeah.
Tyler!
There he is.
We got Tyler. That's awesome. Yeah.
What in the world is going on with the camera situation?
It's
Dan's camera decided to go black screen, and he's trying to get that sorted out. Gabe's on cell, and it looks like Gabe's probably at range, so probably doesn't have the best cell service in the world, so he might bounce in and out. Just like when I see Gabe's cam, it looks like he's got a metal roof over him, so he might be riding a struggle bus too.
Yeah.
But
no Wi-Fi.
And Jay doesn't know how to use a mute button. So that's the skinny of it. So
Word.
I'm in our concrete box that houses the ammo.
nice.
That's such a great place to be.
A bunker.
Well, I like it back there, but if the connection's not so great, and it is intended for ammo storage, so it's got 6 concrete walls and a door,
Yeah.
and the
I
metal
think-
roof too. So
I think it's
I'll go somewhere else, and hopefully that'll be better connection. And sorry, I forgot to say earlier, I probably have about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then I got to get off.
Well, we
Yeah,
better
absolutely.
get on it while people are getting figured out, so we can hear from our guests before they got to bounce.
Yeah. So how about we just dive right in, right? I do have some questions. And typically the format would be that we just call on somebody, but I want to hear from Neil. I want to hear from Gabe. I want to hear from Jay. So, the questions I have are very blanket, such as really just when people talk about imposter syndrome, like what does that mean to you? Like, how do you define that, and how do you recognize that in others? So, Gabe, I'd like to start with you, please.
Sure. As you're asking me for the answer, I'm thinking about the answer here, because the angle of the question was a surprise to me, because I'm trying to think of when I have looked at somebody who's teaching and said to myself that I feel like they have imposter syndrome. I may just be insensitive to it. I kind of feel like, to some extent, it's something that we're going to go through specifically for our subject because we consider it to be really important, and it's got big consequences attached to it. And especially that's like even more magnified coming from a private citizen background. And a lot of us are. And so there was always kind of something in I was kind of recruited into teaching. I mean, I've always loved the martial arts, but consider myself any sort of martial arts master who ought to be teaching anybody else. I have never thought that to be the case, but eventually other people decide it. But it's just, I think in huge part, it's just the gravity of the subject and the responsibility we feel to our clientele to deliver the very, very best possible answer. Nobody has the best possible answer. The highest, most experienced people don't have the best possible answer. They may have the best answer that they know, or maybe the best answer that currently exists, but, conjure up the best possible answer, that's not real. And I think there's a lot more answers, but I guess that'd be my first blush answer. I could go on a long time, but I don't want to eat up the time.
Oh, Neil, how about you follow us up?
Ooh, I think it's a great question, because I think for the most part, most of us will identify that in ourselves, that because I think to some degree, a lot of us deal with that at whatever degree it is. But, recognizing that in somebody else, like Gabe says, is actually really difficult. What I typically see is, it's somebody that's a little bit younger that may not be as established in the community, that maybe hasn't been teaching all that long, and kind of questions themselves a little bit. And where I at least I believe it manifests for some folks is that, when giving like a one-on-one lesson or teaching in a group, when somebody gives that pushback of, yeah, but this doesn't work for me because there isn't an instructor to say, you know what, I get that, but let's embrace the weirdness and let's try this a little bit, versus somebody that might be dealing with some imposter syndrome go, oh, if that works for you, then just keep doing it your way, and walking away. And so at least that's kind of how I look at it. Maybe I'm completely off base on that, but from my perspective, it's typically somebody that's just hasn't been around a ton, and kind of hasn't established themselves yet.
So that actually makes me think of some more, if you want. So I think sometimes this takes the form of kind of like what you're talking about, is just not having quite robust enough for the situation you're addressing, Neil, frame of reference of doctrinal answers to deal with that question, because there's a lot of stuff. And I think a lot of us go through a significant period of time as students engaged in serious training, you're trying to discern what the best answer is. And there's all kinds of different entities out there. And on some level, everybody, by giving an answer, purports that that's the best answer or the most useful one or whatever. And I think that, when you're trying to sort between a bunch of good ways or what are purported to be good ways until you've figured out which are the better ways, which are the worst ways. And a lot of times what ends up happening is you end up getting down to a limited amount of credible things that answer that issue or that question. And within that, it doesn't really matter which one, especially it's just going to be all about, diligence of the practitioner and how much they sharpen it, et cetera. But that you're not really going to find a best answer. But until that question has been settled for the instructor's personal satisfaction, sometimes those answers can be, or those questions or that pushback can be a little tough. If you don't have the frame of reference of, well, there's a bunch of different ways to do this thing we're talking about. And, the one you said, it's got some virtue and here's the upside, but then there's the downside too. And that's why we picked this other thing. And that answer usually ends up being a pretty palatable one for people, even if they think they like the other answer than you gave, that you were like, well, here's what's good about that. Here's what I think is not good about that. Here's what we might get out of this other way. Let's try that way. I think that goes a long ways.
Man, that's awesome. That's good stuff. So we do have a question coming in from one of our viewers. Where is it? I just had it. There it is. Yeah. So Catherine is asking us, how does the idea of fake it till you make it relate or fit with imposter syndrome? Chris, would you mind taking us?
Yeah, I'd love to touch on that one. But first, let me foreshadow this a little bit. So I did some digging around today to really understand or help myself understand like the true definition of like imposter syndrome. And the best one I could come up with today is the condition of feeling anxious or not experiencing success internally despite being high performing in external objective ways. So feeling like a fraud, a phony, other things like that. So I kind of wanted to throw that out there to kind of frame this. So if we're talking about like the fake it till you make it thing, I think the first question one needs to ask themselves is, are you faking it? Right? So are you faking your ability, your acumen, your proficiency, or are you trying to fake your confidence in it? I believe those are two separate and very distinct questions. So I'm not really a proponent of fake it till you make it because I don't like the word fake, right? So I think if you do a real take stock on your ability and then be honest with yourself about it, there's nothing wrong with being intermediate, even from an instructor standpoint. If you're actively seeking betterment, not everyone is an SME. Not everyone is the best in the world. Not everyone is the top 1% yet, right? That's the key kind of term. And I think that's where people get wrapped around the axle. We can put it more into the general audience standpoint and talk about like people shooting. There's this huge dichotomy where people believe if they're here and they're not here, that they don't belong at the table. And that drives me kind of nuts. Because what table is it that you want to sit at? If you want to be with like the 0.0 something percent, well, that's just a matter of time, practice, diligent work to get there. The same thing with instructorship. But that does not mean you're, again, not confident or proficient as long as you're honest about where you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a whole world of sense. Yeah. And I think that adequately answers Catherine's question.
Can I expound on that just a little bit though? So Chris always takes all my best points. So we do this all the time and I love it. But I would add just one little thing to that is, I'm with Chris. I don't like the whole fake it till you make it thing, but I think it's okay to identify the level you're at and then push yourself to that next level. And for an instructor to be teaching, everybody always says, well, stay in your lane. how do you define what your lane is? Your lane is what you've had some training in, what you feel confident teaching. And, you know, for a guy like me, I'm not going to be out there teaching, you know, house clearing tactics or anything along those lines. But because I don't teach a ton of rifle stuff doesn't necessarily mean that's not my lane. But I think that where you need to go with this is, instead of the fake it till you make it, understand where you are and then push yourself to the next level. And that's not faking it. That's just getting better. And you're probably going to fail along the way. You're going to have some struggles. You're going to fight with something along the way. But if you aren't pushing yourself, you're never going to actually make it. And for most of us that are fairly competitive, we never feel like we make it. And I think that's, I'm going to let somebody else address Zach's question that's in the comments, because that's really where that goes.
Man, good stuff. Wow. Yeah. Answering the question that I wish I asked, right? Because it was right there on the top of my skull. So Zach did ask a question. To go alongside with that, what happens if you have made it and you still feel like you're an imposter? That's a really good question. So how about, Dan, would you mind approaching that? Number one, because your camera works, right? And I want to get you in before your camera dies. And number two,
I switched platforms entirely. I should be all right.
Yeah. And then also number two, like, you know, Zach, look, like, so as far as Apache Solutions is concerned, you guys have made it. You guys have straight up made it. Like when you get guys that are getting invited by Tom Gibbons by name, when you get hand selected to go to, you know, the Range Master Symposium, when you have presenters that, you know, you get hand selected to go to, you know, to TACCon to teach, when you're teaching at the Growing a Gun conference, and, you know, the Guardians Nation conference, like, I mean, what more is there? You got instructors coming to, you know, to better themselves in the instructor enhancement program. Dude, you guys have made it.
I think
so.
I don't want to speak for everybody here, but I think it's been my experience that you hold yourself or you hold other people in certain esteems, right? You have known of these people, you've read stuff, you've seen their videos, and when you now start sitting at the same tables, both metaphorically, like Chris was talking about, and physically, when you're actually breaking bread with Neil Widener and John Correa and Tom Givens and all these guys, and you don't necessarily feel like you're on that same level in some way, shape, or form. And despite having made it, it sort of has this odd internal pressure and what you perceive the external view to be of you, what your intended audience sees versus what you perceive as you live through it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So when you have this internal idea that I can't shoot like Gabe White, I know that I can't shoot like Gabe White can, but yet I'm teaching in some of the same places he is. I'm teaching some of the same students he is. Am I doing those students any credit because I can't do what Gabe White can do? And sorry, Gabe, I'm just using you as an example because you're right there on my screen.
You're too kind.
And I just feel like that's the internal pressure. If you have genuine care about the education that you are providing for the students, the value for their money that you're taking from them, if you take that seriously at all, that has to put some kind of pressure on you from inside. I feel it.
That's what I was talking about.
What do you mean, Neil?
Sorry, I said that, and I apologize for interrupting you or trying to interject there. But that's what I was talking about. You feel the gravity of the subject, and so you have an internal need to do the best thing that you can for your students. Right.
There's not a. I think I caught you while I was having some technical difficulties.
Oh, that's correct.
There is no more gravity than teaching these life-saving skills for the worst moment of this person's life. And if you do take that seriously, that has to put some internal pressure on you. And at the same time, if you hold your fellow instructors in any kind of esteem, if you admire them, if you look up to them, and they have knowledge and abilities and behaviors that you want to emulate, you have this, I'm questioning myself because I wonder if they are questioning if I belong too. It's kind of like sitting at the jocks table back when you were a freshman or a sophomore in high school. Like, do I actually belong at this table? Like, am I cool enough to be here? And that's that kind of fake it till you make it thing. And so you have this idea of what other people are perceiving, and you're holding it against what you're perceiving inside yourself. And it's this battle back and forth between those two ideas of who you are as a person, I think, that contributes a lot to the idea of imposter syndrome.
Is there a way that we as instructors and as just, I don't know, decent human beings, is there a way that we can help others to properly mitigate like what that metric is? Because a lot of folks that particularly suffer from imposter syndrome, they try to put their mentors and whoever they look up to, try to put them on some kind of pedestal. And because they don't perceive themselves as being there, they think of themselves as somehow lesser.
Well, can I just one more thing real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. So Neil touched on this a little bit ago about, do you believe in the material that you're presenting being valid and relevant? And I had like a little question around that, because we all know or have seen some folks who are teaching some stuff that they fully believe is relevant, that we know full well is 25 years behind the times. And they don't feel imposter syndrome at all.
Yeah.
You know the people I'm talking about. And it's, I guess for me, I don't want to ever be perceived as that guy, as the guy who's so far behind the times and he doesn't even know it. And I think that's just a little bit of imposter syndrome that I have left, that I don't want to be perceived as that guy who's totally not relevant but thinks that he is.
Somehow, I don't think you'll have that problem, Dan. I don't think that's going to be an issue for you.
So I got a whole other angle to think about this, and this just occurred to me kind of while we're talking. So you know how one of the couple steps elevated principles that we have in the training world, and I think quite rightly so, is that you need to train the things that you're not good at, right? So like if you got a good draw, you probably don't need to sit there and draw for 3 hours a night. You should probably do something else that you're not good at and expand it larger. If you are already a perfectly good shooter, maybe you should go to jiu-jitsu or the gym or medical training, or fortify your finances so you do not become homeless and at risk for all the horrible things that people are at risk for there, right? So there's like all kinds of angles, and it gets real big real quick. And what if we just took the entire subject and said, this is something we're all already really good at? I mean, like really big picture thing, right? Compared to like general population. Maybe something that is completely else that we can be beginners at and not be good at. would be some helpful perspective on this. I feel like I've been getting this from music production, because that's like whole other world. I don't consider myself good at it, and I've gotten however far I've gotten, and it's been interesting for my perspective on training in the defensive world. I mean, like my very steep learning curve and being much newer there, that really kind of changes the tone for me over here on this side.
I don't know, man. I think Leopard Step is dope. So
thank you,
dude. Like,
thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Absolute fire.
Can I pop in on this one just because Gabe made me think about something? So if we're talking about like imposter syndrome as a whole, right? It's a cognitive distortion when we go look at the pure definition of it. So I think what he's talking about being comfortable, being uncomfortable, to use like a cliche phrase, doing something you don't normally do, to kind of understand that perspective of it, because imposter syndrome normally is going to manifest itself in high performers. That's normally where it's going to show up. And that could be for a myriad of reasons. When someone was young, they were put in high pressure situations, or always had to win, or they're a perfectionist by nature, all of these things, but they normally manifest in high performers. And what that does is there is no performance that is good enough. And certainly I understand that line of thinking, but learning to go into situations where you don't know everything, you don't feel competent, gives you perspective. And then you'll start to realize in certain places where you do have a high level of skill, maybe you can begin to accept that, versus just going, well, if I continue to do this same thing till I'm utmost perfect at it, I'll feel okay. Or if I win this trinket, or I have this good class, because what happens inevitably in those situations are those goals are attained and they're fleeting. They don't mean much. And I think that's where people kind of, again, get in this like bad rub situation where they're so focused on a singular thing, no matter what they do, there will be no win, right? It won't change their self-esteem. It won't change how they feel about themselves, where maybe putting yourself in different situations would bring you some yield. But I digress. Sorry, Gabe, that just made me go down that rabbit hole.
Not at all.
Can I join you in that rabbit hole for a minute? Because again, Chris gives me good things to think about. But when you talk about high performers, and the thing about high performers is they know how to do the job, or do whatever the task is, and they know where they lack. And I think sometimes that, tying into what Gabe said about, maybe sometimes we don't practice those things that we kind of suck at because we suck at them and we want to avoid that. So then when we're out in front of a class, or we're out in front of a crowd, or we're on a live stream, or whatever the case may be, we may avoid that because deep down in our hearts, we know, hey, you know what? I'm not that good at this one particular piece of it. And I think that's where the imposter syndrome begins to creep in, because potentially we already have identified what we aren't great at. So because we're not great at everything, to some degree, we can't be great at everything, at anything. And so now all of a sudden we're an imposter.
Well, right. Yeah. No, I'm with you. But, over time, you do develop enough skill, even in the things that whatever sub areas we think we're not good enough at, or not as good at, still develop enough skill that, generally speaking, outside observers, particularly students, still that's not how it comes across a lot of the time. But I think I think there's a division there, though, depending on what you're teaching. So if it's a time and accuracy performance thing that's being demonstrated, okay, that's kind of another land and almost its own thing unto itself. But everything that does not have to be that way, I mean, I think it wasn't bad advice at all that I got in very, very early on in my time as an instructor and this is admittedly as talking to a more foundational level of student, of that, you really don't need to show it at your level of ability. And lots of times all that does is obscure what you're actually doing. So there are some different answers for performance oriented stuff specifically, but that's kind of its own little sub area of interest. And for, training at large, all the things that don't have to be shown quickly, they need to be shown clearly. And they need to be shown in a way that is articulate, both physically and verbally. And that's what's going to come across as the good teaching. It's not about, I inserted the magazine. I tugged on it to make sure it was seated. I racked the slide hard. Okay, that's demonstrative. That's like, I did these things. Nobody's going to put it on a timer and be like, hey, bro, that's some weak admin load and unload there. It's an admin skill. That's fine. That's not what we're measuring. So I think it kind of depends.
Sure. Yeah, so I was doing a little bit of research on my own, right? Because it's imposter syndrome, right? So you can kind of figure that out face value, right? But I was kind of interested in delving deeper a little bit into the topic and what exactly, what's the meat and potatoes of the imposter syndrome. And something kind of stuck out to me about it, right? And so a publication I was reading saying that they with the imposter syndrome feel soon others will discover the truth about them, right? That they attribute their success to luck or being in the right place at the right time, right? And that kind of like stuck out to me. That's very interesting that that they would feel that way, right? So what is the truth, right? The truth that they're not real, the truth that they're not really stepping up to the plate, that they're not about what they say that they're about, and stuff like that. So it's just kind of interesting, to look at that as like an attribute of the mindset of somebody with imposter syndrome, to look at that, and especially attributing success to luck and right place and right time. I'm sure there's plenty of times where we've all been dumbfounded by success. Like, there's no way that this is happening to me, and things like that. So I think a lot of it's just that feeling, but on a much broader or grander scale, whatnot.
I think there's a little bit of a kind of a little bit of a porting of worlds here with the phrase itself, the fake it till you make it. And I know we just started with that because that's a normal phrase. I like that phrase. That's a thing. And I'm not at all harshing on Catherine's question or the phraseology of it, because that's like, I recognize that is a phrase. That's a thing. That's a perfectly good way to ask the question. But to me, what Jay just said about right place, right time, I have definitely seen people that I believed were successful because of being right place, right time. When something got big, went off, they were already there. Now they're huge because the thing got huge, but very quickly they get surpassed by people who are more skilled at that thing because they were getting into it when the thing is huger. And when the thing is huger, it will be more competitive because more people will be in it. And so I've definitely seen that in some other areas. I guess when I think of the private sector, at least, okay, so I don't want to speak to institutional settings because I feel like there could be some goings on outside of my experience that maybe would not be this way. I kind of think maybe there would be, but I don't know. I haven't been there. But in the private sector, there's a bit of a market decision being made here. If your stuff sucks, you're not going to be teaching it that long. I get as much as I want that to be true, that might be sadly untrue some of the time. There's got to be some of that in there, right? Like, people who do a bad job will tend to not be working as much, not doing as much training, not for as many people and not for as long a time as for people who do it better. And I know there's all the, horror stories of there's like somebody who's a good talker or good at marketing themselves. And so they have, endless high dollar private lessons and stuff, and they're teaching people terrible snake oil stuff. I get it. I know that there's a few of them, and we love to harsh on them on the internet, but I kind of feel like that's a bit of the exception. This is a bit of a meritocracy, and it's kind of decided by the market, the clients in the market, and I think that kind of plays into it a little bit.
So I kind of want to jump in here on this and kind of get a little personal about this, because you had brought up about institutionalized training versus private training. And for the vast majority of my career was in institutionalized training with agencies, departments, and things like that, military, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And I can, without a doubt, honestly tell you, I did not once get a feeling or hint of imposter syndrome during my role in any of those positions, right? The minute I hopped off and decided to open up my own school and do my own thing, started, am I good enough? Am I teaching the right stuff? Who's going to want to listen to me? Who's going to want to do this? Right. It's immediately, because it's all on you. Right. And you want to make sure that you're giving people, to, like you guys said before, that bang for buck. Right. I want to make sure I'm putting out a quality product. Right. The more people are going to come back to me, then you're worrying about the business and, aspects and things like that. Right. So it's kind of interesting, right, between the different clientele, right, they're going from institutionalized to private sector and people shelling out their hard-earned dollars, that mind shift that happens into that, right, of now you're worried about, like, crap, this is my baby, right, I'm the one who, it makes or breaks it, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of that happens.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could see how that would be. I mean, in a professional setting, you're kind of a vessel of the institution, unless you wrote the program, which lots of places you definitely did not. You're the vessel delivering the program. Then it's like, hey, don't like it. I understand, but I didn't invent this, and you're not paying. And those two things maybe change it a bit. I hear you. I hear you.
Tyler looks like he wants to say something.
Memphis, you're muted, sir. You're muted.
I wanted to say, hey, let's get Tyler in for a second. So it looks like he wants to say something.
Hey, Memphis, there's a mute button, sir. Ask me how I know.
All right, y'all ready? Outstanding. First off, thanks for letting me in. I didn't think I was going to make it tonight. Work was crazy. But the grace of God opened up the roads for me, and I got home way faster than I thought I was going to. So anyway, imposter syndrome. Here is my weird take on it. It is the ugly cousin of shiny object syndrome. And what do I mean by that? People that take great pride in their own progression and how they can help others are always so hypercritical of themselves. Every time they notice something that they are deficient in, they latch onto it like that shiny object. And in a weird type of way, people with imposter syndrome, in a weird type of way, they start to try to define themselves off of that thing that they are deficient in. And that's exactly what everyone else has already said. But my take is, it's so easy for us, people that truly care about what we're delivering and our own personal growth, so that we can be good stewards of our craft and not be phonies, that we're constantly chasing the things that we're deficient in. And again, that it's that shiny object syndrome. That's the only thing we're always focused on. And it keeps us from really being able to step back and be appreciative and sort of proud of how far we've come and the things we've accomplished, the amount of people we've helped, so on and so forth. Now, am I saying that you should always have an ego of, oh man, I've done all these things, you should listen to me? No, I think we just need to have a healthy balance of understanding, like, hey, hard work is paying off. If I find myself deficient in things, guess what? All that hard work's already paid off. I've proved myself that I can do it. Let's just keep on going with it. And I speak that from a dude down that same journey, not from the mount of peak perfection. It's an everyday struggle, man. So that's my little 2 cents on it.
So that kind of brings up a sort of related subject that was touched on yesterday and or today about positive self-talk, negative self-talk, honest criticism, and where does that fall into teaching and where does that fall into our own self-evaluation. And I think there was a couple things in some of the conversation that occurred, I think, yesterday. The difference between criticism and negative self-talk is that criticism is valuable because you're identifying actual deficiencies instead of attaching emotional value to what those deficiencies are, i.e., I snagged my draw, I didn't get a proper grip, and I sent those 2 shots anyway, versus I flubbed that draw and I suck. It's an evaluation. Those are 2 separate evaluations of the exact same event. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And Chris is sort of my go-to guy on this, with removing that emotional value attachment to performance criticism and just looking at how do I correct this to make my performance match the shooter I know I am capable of being. And I don't see that as fluffy bunnies and ice cream, everything's beautiful. I look at that as identifying what actually occurred and improving, rather than getting stuck in the negative thought cycle of, man, I keep screwing this up, I suck. And I think that negative thought cycle is really what kind of perpetuates continued problems. Am I saying that right, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that wholeheartedly. I think rigorous honesty and evaluation are important, but I think where it falls short is people approach performance not from an analytical nature, but from an emotional nature. And if you look at it purely on analytics, separate yourself from task, now you can actually honestly evaluate where the deficiencies are. And that's, I mean, we've all seen it as coaches, like the head shaking or a poor demonstration of something by a student or a person in general. And then it snowballs, right? It turns into this cascading black hole of failure, right? Where everyone watching or everyone involved knows that the person is capable of more, yet they can't overcome that mental hurdle. And obviously, I'll try and keep this short, but I can go down like the mental side of this hugely. But I think that's where the difference lies, where analytics can change the way you shoot. Emotional attachment turn it into something that's very, very hard to overcome from a personality standpoint. And then if you become emotionally attached to a bad performance, and there's certainly the people that say, well, when I get this information, I just push harder because, I just like to be. Nobody in the history of ever, of their own volition, got better by self-deprecating or beating themselves. It just doesn't work. Now, it may create short-term motivation, but that short-term motivation will turn into burnout and will eventually turn into quitting 100% of the time. So that's where the talk of process, all of this stuff comes from. The outcome that you seek will eventually come, but you have to learn to enjoy the work to get there. If you're solely focused on this end game to compare myself to someone else, it's a losing battle that will end up in injury, all sorts of myriad of things. But yes, Dan, well done.
That's like a macro level of process versus outcome focus. That's really cool.
Yeah.
You brought up something that I definitely address when I see it, and I don't see it too often, but you definitely don't want people expressing frustration or displeasure through the gun. Not only from the standpoint of it being a safety issue, or particularly 2 more steps down that road and it's gonna be a safety issue, not even from that standpoint, but from the standpoint of turning it into actual, of not not detracting from the actual performance due to the negative feelings. Like I do think it's very, very hard to control our feelings and our emotions. I think that, or maybe I'm just speaking to me, but lots of I think emotions just kind of like come into our head and into our heart unbidden, and you deal with them. That's how I would describe my emotional experience. But what they do need to do is F off and get out of the way of the performance, the thing that needs to happen. And to me, this is also a lot back to the kind of the first point we made about like the gravity of the subject being a lot of the source of this. Is if we think that there is a need for the subject to be taught and we're in the position to teach it, then it needs to get taught and we need to do the best we can. So all these feelings need to F off and get out of the way because there is a job to be done and that job needs to be done now. So do it.
Yeah.
I was
Jay.
reading, audiobooking, whatever, something, right? How Champions Think by Dr. Bob Rotella, right? And it was very interesting that, every case study that he spoke about, right, whether they were, an athlete, whether they had really good financials, whoever the top tier peak, right, singer, songwriter, artist, whatever, right, whoever they were, right, he highlighted their ability to find the optimism within the negative, right, even though a negative thing would happen. Right, whatever it is, they would strike out, they miss foul, miss layup shots, whatever. Right, they would find some level of optimism within that, and they would focus on that aspect of cool. This is the positive, right? I'm going to take that, and I'm going to make my mental space on the positive versus the negative. Right, they identify the negative, right, but they focus on the positive aspect of it. And he says, he definitely covered that champions, winners, top tier performers. That's a key attribute of them, is being able to find that and highlight that.
And I think
that's a very interesting point. I had not heard that made before, but I've seen it.
Yeah.
Before.
If you haven't read the book yet, I highly, highly recommend it, because it was definitely kind of an eye opener to me, because, it was just, he was saying, like, so he took Tiger Woods, for example, right? And Tiger Woods' initial goal was to set out and break Jack Nicklaus' record, right, of most Grand Slams, or whatever the thing in golf is, right, the most. He hasn't. I think the top is 12. The record is 12 or something like that, and Tiger has 8 or something like that. But who's going to say that Tiger isn't a great golfer, right? So he hasn't reached that peak of that 12 of that goal, right? But along the way, the positive, he hasn't focused. The negative would be he hasn't reached that goal. But the positive is that, hey, I have 8 Grand Slams or 8 championships, whatever it is, right along that way. So it's just kind of interesting to look at that.
That is interesting. What was the name of that book again?
How Champions Think by Dr. Bob Rotella. He's a sports psychologist. It was very, very intriguing.
I'm going to take a look at that and share those with the book club I have.
Hey guys, I hate to have to take off, but it is about that time. I got to go get. It's about enough break time. I need to go get set up for training tonight. So, great discussion. I'm really sorry to leave it, but thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Gabe. Man, right. Thanks for coming on short notice, bud.
You bet. We'll see everybody sooner rather than later, hopefully. Take care.
I have one quip that I wanted to go back on that Gabe was kind of touching on before, that when he was talking about people like getting emotional and it kind of throws them off, right? And it got me thinking, and some of you guys have probably heard me say this before, but I believe the key to high proficiency with a gun, and my specialty would be pistol craft, is about having like quality communication with the gun, a conversation. And when we talk about like emotional attachment, or people that have less than favorable emotional regulation in relation to that, it's like, imagine if you're angry or you're frustrated and now you're arguing with the gun. Like you are trying to impose will on it and just arguing with it versus just having a conversation. Now this goes way higher. I mean, this could apply to all sorts of relationships with anything, but Learning to take the information you are getting and do something about it in a rational type way is the difference between the ultra high performers and the intermediate or relative high performers. That's when pressure no longer really becomes an issue. It becomes an amplifier. That's when worry about other things or other external judgment becomes less imperative in the performance of a task. It's not emotional. It's a thing. You're trying to manipulate a thing. So that's something that's always kind of helped me, because I'm talking to the gun, and the harder I try or the angrier I get, now I'm just yelling at the gun versus hearing what the gun is telling me and implementing or framing my conversation around that.
I love that perspective. It reminds me of the saying that, you know, when iron sights whisper, a red dot screams. It started getting me thinking about, you know, because everybody wants to command the gun. They want to tell it what to do instead of just accepting what you can feel from it. We have a couple of comments. We have a couple of questions from the crowd. So Stephanie Widener came through with a really, really interesting question here. So many people think they aren't good enough and they hang back, and people that aren't encumbered by a strong sense of service or responsibility end up filling the space. That's a bad outcome. It's not really so much of a question, but it begs a question. So, of course, we see that in our community. What's the best way for us to approach that? Do we call it out? Do we try to overcome that with counter information? How do we address that?
It's tough, right? Because you really want to jump on, right? Because you know I'm at the range sometimes, right? Maybe shooting by myself, and I have someone next door, right, giving that bad information, and everything inside my head is like, say something, scream, like jump in, right? But is it my place, right? Because I know if I jump in and I say something, the immediate question is going to be who the hell are you, right? And that's really the question: who the hell are you to jump in and tell them and correct? And right, we're kind of gatekeeping the community, right? The gatekeeping of the good information and techniques and things like that. I understand that, but at the same time, I mean, they're well within their right to teach what they're teaching, because that person voted with their dollars and voted with that person, right? They put their money in that hand, and even though it's then now you're towing the line of professionalism too, right? Because we as instructors, we kind of have to keep that, right? Kind of take that moral high road of how's that going to look at me, right? How's the student going to look? Some rando walks up and starts telling their instructor that they paid money, right? How they're doing wrong and things like that. So it's a mix. It's tough, right? Trying to figure out. I think the telltale sign of when it's really appropriate to step in and maybe say something is when safety's at the issue, right? Safety is definitely that line in the sand of, hey, because we can all agree what is and isn't safe, right? I mean, I think that's pretty much commonplace, and saying, hey, this is not safe. But as far as technique goes and things like that, I mean, it is what it is. And unfortunately, me personally, maybe somebody else in here, we didn't start off with the best instruction. I didn't start off with the best instructor. I've kind of had to develop and make my way through. So I guess you could kind of argue and say that it's the path, right? It's just, it's what you got to go through in order to get to, the good information.
We don't always see that in person, though. We also see it online. So I know, what was it? So for those of us that know, right, there's this game called Can You STFU, right? And there's
I wonder who came up with that game.
Gee, I wonder, right?
You know where that came from?
Is there a story behind it? Because I love stories.
It came up in a different line of work when I was in a sales position trying to sell something to somebody, and they were giving me all of the reason, much like what Jay was just talking about. Somebody else had told them all of the things that were completely and utterly wrong and dangerous about what they were doing. But they were very enamored with that person, and they had already voted with their dollars. And I decided this isn't worth it. So I'm just going to shut up. And then it just turned into a challenge over the years. And so now it's a thing. Apparently it's a thing all over the place, and I love it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like, I just gotta, when I see it online, I gotta pick my battles.
Right.
I look at my phone and I'm up there like, okay, is this worth me spending the next 45 minutes? And is it going to be receptive? Right. Am I just talking to a brick wall here? And so,
or are you talking to a bot? You just never know. So can I, so when Jay was talking, it kind of made me think of something that, I don't think Steph's comment was as much of a question as a statement of, there's people out there that are going to fill this space. And they may or may not be the right people for it. I believe we are the right people for it. I believe the people that at least the circles that I run in and the circles that I see here, these are the people that I want teaching others. And there's some that I don't. And, I don't think the right answer is to step up in the middle of somebody's, one-on-one or in the middle of somebody's class and say something publicly, because then you're the jerk and you're the one that couldn't shut up or whatever the case may be. But if you really and truly want to affect change, I think you've got to begin to start asking questions of those people and try to have a relationship with them to some degree, and pick their brain and really get them to explain their position. And in the history of changing minds, never has it worked to walk up and say, hey, you're wrong, and here's what you need to think. It just doesn't happen. I've never seen it happen. But where I have seen people change their mind is when you start asking them questions and just politely and professionally challenge their own position. I'm probably lucky because we get, a few thousand comments a day, and I get to choose my battles there and decide. But the people whose minds that I can change are the ones that I ask questions to. And so I'm like, hey, what specifically are you disagreeing with here? Because those are the ones that I always engage with of, you're just wrong on this. Okay, well, what specifically is wrong about it? And if they will engage, at that point, I get to gauge. If they're just going to come back and be a troll, then fine, you're off and no big deal. I'll just go find somebody else. But if they will engage in the conversation, and I can, maneuver the conversation around to where they actually have to defend their position, or like what Jay was talking about, if you approach that instructor afterwards and ask them questions and get them to the point where it's not going to feel like an attack, but it's an actual earnest interest in learning what it is that they have to say. A lot of times we will change people's position just by making them defend their own. Because if they defend their position and all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a minute, what about, how does, can you reconcile how this and that work together? And if they can't do it, that opens up in some cases, it's going to open up their mind, and you're going to, we're going to affect change. And in some cases we may get people to do things maybe better, or at least differently to some degree, or they're going to be completely entrenched in it. And at that point we play the game and walk away.
That sounds like the Socratic method.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
let's let Dan go, because this has been like, it's been brewing. It's been percolating for a minute here.
Did you say hold on? Did you just say percolating?
I said percolating on a live stream.
Oh,
yeah, I sure did.
Memphis.
I'm sorry, my Memphis came out.
So I don't disagree with what Neil's saying when it comes to in-person interactions. And under certain circumstances, the Neil's approach online, it can also be very productive. When it comes to the people who are entrenched and want the argument, they want to troll, they want to try to play got you with phrasing, whatever that they happen to be doing, I have found that I get a lot of success not in changing their minds, but the people who are reading the conversation. Because there is a large piece of the online interaction that is not necessarily the participants, but the people who are actually reading the interaction or who are watching the interaction. Those are the folks who are there in earnest, who are actually trying to learn. And those are the people who are applying some level of critical thought to this. And if you do so professionally, if you don't engage in ad hominem attacks, if you use very descriptive language and show your expertise, for lack of a better term, you will get converts, if you will. You'll get people who are like, huh, never thought of it that way before. And I can tell you for 100% factual, I've kind of tracked it. There are about 100 members of the Deliberate Training Group who are people I found online on the Reddit CCW subreddit, which is in large part a cesspool. But there are people there who want to learn. There are people there who want to get good information. And those are the people that I'm trying to reach. And those people aren't necessarily going to engage in the conversation. They're not necessarily going to engage in the debate, but they will read, and they will read back and forths. And it's kind of the niche that I have entered in order to try to find those people to pull into our community.
So someone much smarter than me, specifically my pastor, once said that anything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. Let me tell you what he means. So if you say yes to putting your time into arguing with whoever or trying to persuade or whatever your energy is into social media or wherever, you're saying no to personal time with your wife, your kids. You're saying no to catching up with on some work emails or something that you should probably find a little bit more productive. Now, there are people like Dan that are good at navigating the social media people, because I don't quite understand how to read someone's comment and know whether or not I'd be wasting my time engaging with it. So I just simply don't. All right. So for people like me that don't really understand that, I, at some point in life, in the past few years, just decided to start saying no to all that. That way I can give more important things a yes. Whereas before, when in my younger years, of course, naive, stupid, 20-something-year-old with all the ego, Dunning-Kruger at the top of Mount Stupid, would argue with anybody that would give me the time to argue with them, because I was always right and they were always wrong. And man, that I wasted so much time. I could have done so many more productive things. I could be so much of a better shooter right now if I had just said no to all that nonsense and yes to something a little bit more productive. So long story short, anything you say yes to, you're likely saying no to something else.
Yeah.
Well, time is finite, right? Like, you can only focus on one thing at a time. Me being here with you guys, I find to be a productive use of my time. I'm not currently hanging out with my stepdaughter who's home from college and leaves on Sunday, but there's a huge variety of things I could be doing in this moment. I'm always saying no to something. I'm not saying you're 100% correct, Tyler, but where we focus our priorities in any given moment, if you find value in that, then you are doing something that is worthwhile. if you're finding value in it. If you don't find value in it, I don't know why you're doing it to begin with. But if you get some level of satisfaction out of it and make something better, anything better, I think there's value added there.
But I think the reality is when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to everything else. You know, it's not, you're not just saying no to one other thing, you're saying no to everything else. You know, and so I like that point and I like that concept. But at the end of the day, you know, the discussion that, you know, to come back, I think we were talking about Steph's comment in there of, you know, when we've got those folks that maybe don't have the same, I don't know, level of commitment to getting better than what every one of you guys here that I see. How do we address that? And how do we walk away from it? Do we leave it alone? If we say yes to walking away from it, we don't impact much change at all. And so at some point, I think we do have to pick our battles, but we've got to choose to engage sometimes. And if somebody's doing something, you know, that, and they're teaching, you know, poor technique, that's one thing. And, you know, I can walk away from that all day long and twice on Sunday. But striking up a conversation with that instructor in the lobby is something that I'm happy to do. You know, now if it's a safety issue, then yeah, I'm going to walk over and we're going to talk about it right now. If there's a safety issue, because, you know, I don't think that any of us here would walk away if we see a safety issue. Now you may run away depending on what the safety issue is, but, you know, but I think we're all going to address that. So I think there's levels of this. But, you know, when we're really talking about those folks that aren't as engaged in the learning process and aren't trying to do the right thing, you know, everybody believes they're trying to do the right thing. They just may not see it. And so I think that we do have some responsibility to address that to the best of our ability.
You know, a few years ago, I was an RSO at a range local to me. And there was an instructor that, you know, would come in and he was teaching students, and he would have his students. All right, now I need you guys to envision this with me. Imagine you being in an indoor range. You know how you have like the walls on either side of you on the indoor range, right? He had his students placing 1 foot against this wall, 1 foot all the way against this wall, and squat down almost in a kung fu horse stance. Right. And I'm RSOing, and it is eating me alive. Right. I want to jump in. I want to just like, you know, what is going on? You know, I just want to jump in. But, you know, to the point of safety, guns are pointed down range, fingers are off triggers, you know, magazines are being removed, it's ejected, right? All the safety protocols are being adhered to, right? So really, what leg do I have to stand on, right? And at that point in time, right, I was representing another company, right? The company that I was working for. And, you know, now I had to worry about what's this instructor going to think of this company if I step forward to say something. Right now I'm, you know, oh, your RSO from this range said something to me, you know, and whatnot. So it's always a give and take, right? And knowing when and where, you know, time and place. I always say it's time and place, you know, picking your battles and things like that. So it's, you know, same thing online, right? To Dan's point, right? Time and place. You know, is this a point of where some other person that I'm engaging with could benefit from the information that's about to transcend? If not, then maybe that engagement doesn't need to happen. And, you know, to Tyler's point, you know, myself, years past, I would go to war online. Like it would just be like, all right, cool. Guess what? It's wartime, baby. Right. We're going to just like send back and forth. But I mean, there's so many more beneficial things to be doing with your time and everything. And, you know, it's just, you know, pick and choose and, you know, let it go.
Can I hop on this one a little bit? And this one, I want to talk directly to instructors. And this is coming from a pretty significant business background. And however you interact or whatever you do, or whatever you're concerned with competition or whatever they're doing, my singular piece of advice is never worry about a product someone else is bringing to market, because all of that work, all of that effort is keeping you from putting that energy into your own product. When you begin to worry about your own product or perfecting what you're bringing to market and not worrying about what anyone else is doing, or within reason, right? We talked about the safety aspect, but that's where I think is one of the biggest cancers in industry in general, our industry in particular, is everyone's worried about what someone else is doing and if it's correct or not. I'm gonna use a curse word here, but who gives a shit if it's correct or not? Worry about what you're doing, put all of that effort into kind of what you're creating to bring to market, and then you differentiate yourself from it. It's marketing 101. When you get into like this going around down, swirling down the drain, because this person's doing that and you don't agree with it, and you bring that into an online presence, now you just become someone that's so good. That's when the hater comments or stuff like that, you tarnish your reputation because you're so influenced by external things that have nothing to do with what you're doing. You're trying to prove yourself right versus putting your information out there and letting the market decide if the information is right.
So on that topic, we do have another question that came in from Zach Cox of Apache Solutions. There is a difference between pride and being proud of something you know / acknowledged. You can also be too humble. How do you find the balance between the two? On the other hand, overcoming / pushing past imposter syndrome, you could possibly lose some of your humility and care for it being about, or care for it being about the student. How do you not become a tyrannical asshole? So almost like two questions there. How do you skirt the line between humility and, I want to say, arrogance, maybe?
I think I don't think there's a line between humility and arrogance. I think there's a enormous gap between those two things. I think there's a huge space between humility and arrogance. I think where you run into issues is you have folks who will demonstrate false humility. And then you'll have folks who will pretend themselves to be something that they're not, in the vein of having too much ego. Where it starts getting closer and closer and closer is as you begin to get into a high performing area, like Chris was talking about, that imposter syndrome tends to affect higher performers. You have to understand how to objectively evaluate your own levels of competency within whatever subject matter that you're talking about. And I do a whole piece on that in the Apache instructor program that everybody should come to. But yeah, having humility and being proud of accomplishments are flip sides of the same coin. You can be humble and accept compliments and accept accolades and be proud of those things that you have accomplished, whether they're objective or subjective accomplishments. I'll use myself as an example. Presenting at the Rangemaster Trainers Symposium, I'm enormously proud of that. I'm very, very proud of that. I, at the same time, was humbled to be asked to do that. And I feel very good about the performance I put on. I feel very good about the information that I presented at that symposium. But I don't think that I have been arrogant about it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I don't think you've ever been arrogant about it. I don't think you've ever been humble about it either, because you don't have a right to be humble about it. You should be proud. You should absolutely be proud. I know I would. Um, yeah. So I think what happens is we do see instances where folks are way too humble, right? And they don't step into it. They don't own that position, that, you know, they don't own the marketplace that they have for themselves. And that holds them back because they have good information in their heads. And this is the thing that really kind of, you know, gets me kind of fired up about the firearms community and the instructors community. We got a lot of really knowledgeable folks out there that have been to the best schools, that have trained with the best guys. And there's people out there that need the knowledge that are in their heads, but they don't have the courage to step into that role and do what needs to be done. So
it's kind of interesting. I was doing some, in my research before this, I looked up what's the direct opposite of imposter syndrome, and it's Dunning-Kruger. Dunning-Kruger is the direct opposite, right? The yin and the yang, right? The yin being imposter syndrome, the yang being Dunning-Kruger. And I was like, when I read that, I was like, son of a gun, that makes absolute sense about that. And it was so crazy just to see those two interlinked together, as go hand in hand. So it was very interesting to read that. And it's, we see that we're talking about it right now, that everything that we're speaking about kind of is that hinting towards that Dunning-Kruger realm of the people that are the overconfident, the arrogance, that type of things, right? About, maybe they don't know so much, so they over embellish it, right? And whatnot.
So words mean things, right? And you guys all know me that like I get really tied up in words. So let's talk about the definition of humility. So the definition of humility is an accurate assessment of one's own abilities when faced with measurables, right? Can we all agree that that's a reasonable definition? Okay. So that means accurate. Accurate is the key word in that definition. We get into the imposter syndrome. That goes back to what we talked about before. The key statement in imposter syndrome, despite alternative evidence. So evidence suggests that you're here, but an honest assessment of that doesn't allow you to believe you're there, right? So if you kind of put those two together, that leads you into kind of like a false humility. Now, false humility, in my opinion, is there's an honest assessment and that person knows what they're capable of. However, they're choosing to hide that for gain. That's the key part of that, for gain. So you'll run into like people that are giving false compliments to people or degrading their own skill level to seek sympathy or whatever you want, right? Again, another dishonest kind of point of view. There's going to be like a theme to this being honesty, in case no one caught that. But then you get into like arrogance. And I believe arrogance is also another one of those inflated ideas where someone's overconfident in their skill level. And they'll use words or descriptors or singular events to describe skill, which again is another cognitive kind of dissonance over who someone really is. Then you can get into like the unconfident. So unconfident or incompetent, that's again, as long as you're honest about any of those things, the ability to manipulate it or change it exists. But I think what happens more often than not is people are not comfortable with who and or where they are. So they choose to do something different. And that goes for the people with altruistic or positive kind of outlooks or negative outlooks or motivations on the positive or negative, versus just being, okay, this is where I am and that's okay because I'm going here. versus trying to be someone you're not, because that's unsustainable in the long term. But
So something I want to, it's not really piggybacking, but kind of like a little factoid I want to share with everybody about imposter syndrome is, do you guys know that I was doing my research, that I came across, I realized that imposter syndrome is a misnomer in itself because it's not a diagnosable syndrome. So imposter syndrome is an imposter in the name. So it was just kind of interesting to hear that and read that and figure that out, that like, oh,
Okay,
oh,
you're blowing my mind here. Okay,
well,
Look at
Jay
Jay
wants to
being
go
all
full
intellectual.
nerd.
I went down the rabbit hole, man. I was just doing my research and looking, and I was like, and it said it wasn't diagnosable, and I was like, so that means, right, you're labeling yourself as imposter syndrome and you're saying I'm an imposter, right? You're impostoring as the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
an imposter syndrome is an imposter of a syndrome. So it's like a dream inside of a dream inside of a dream.
This is so meta.
So
Isn't there a movie about that?
Super
Screw
nerd.
Zuckerberg.
The
Screw
term
him.
was coined in 1978 by a pair of clinical psychologists, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes, in 1978. And Jay is 100% correct. It is a non-diagnosable, non-clinical term.
Oh, that was before Jay was even born.
You right. 88, baby. Model 88.
Shit, that was back when my mom was born.
Wow.
You're
I
welcome.
was well born then. Thank you. All
Tyler, did you say your mom was born in 78?
She was born in 71.
Okay.
Hey,
Yep.
my sister was born in 71. Hey, there we go.
Hey, right quick, I'd like to touch base on what Zach said. He said, being too humble, balancing the two, losing your humility, and losing your care for it being about the student. Well, if we are such good stewards with our craft, that means we are, in fact, process-driven, focused, and motivated. Well, the process part of teaching is the student. So if we are true to our craft and true to our passion, and our process-driven focus is that of the student, you never really have to worry about any of that, because at heart, you really do care about the development and the learning of the student, making sure they understand what you're trying to convey, making sure that they're safe, making sure that they're having a good time, like all the things. If you are serving your student, that is the process of teaching, instructing, coaching, whatever you want to call it, then you don't have to worry about any of that. It's when you start worrying about the outcome of it, like, oh, how are they going to see me? How much money am I going to make from this class? Things of that nature. What conference am I going to get invited to? Well, that's where you start getting into false humility. It's when you start worrying about, or having to worry about, losing the best interest of the student. And unfortunately, the people that are going down that terrible path, they're not worried about it anyway. So again, they're more focused on how much money they're making, where they're going to be, all that nonsense. So anyway, that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, and the mic drops.
Yeah. Because that was, that's the, being a little meta here for a second, that's the hardest thing about, I don't want to say moderating, but, basically like steering this thing right here, right? Because you want to listen, right? And it's the stuff that we're saying the stuff that I'm hearing right here is so freaking deep that I kind of forget to like change all the camera angles and stuff like that. So it's like, man, that was awesome. And then how can I apply this to my life? And should I be writing this down? Oh yeah, I gotta change this camera angle real quick. So, but
can you bring up the James Barron question? What was that?
Yeah, let's talk about James. James is awesome. Hey, James. So humble, bad. Arrogant, bad. Self-awareness is good. Goes for instructors and students alike. Defeats imposter syndrome every time.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to jump on that because just because you're self-aware doesn't mean that you can't have imposter syndrome, right? Doesn't mean that you're not sitting there, you can be self-aware about, hey, I know where I am, I know what I'm doing, but at the same time doesn't mean that you can't doubt yourself and doubt what you're doing and doubt what, the abilities that you have and compared to everybody else, right? I mean, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, that just because you have this doesn't mean you're not going to have this or whatever, right? So I think it's, yes, being self-aware, right? And being consciously active in negating those attributes and things like that, right? Be like, have those little pep talks and confidence boosters and things like that. So I don't think that just one necessarily leads to the other. And it's just because you're self-aware, it's automatically going to wipe out the imposter syndrome. I think, if you're actively working to combat it, I think that's when it matters.
Would it be fair to say, in your estimation, Jay, since you brought that up, would it be fair to say if you have self-awareness and self-acceptance, that would be the absolute defeat of imposter syndrome?
Yes, I think that formula right there, right, is definitely the route to go, right, and whatnot. So, because you just, like I said, just because you have the one doesn't mean you have the other. You need to have that self acceptance and understanding. Hey, that confidence of, I am putting out a good, valuable product. I am confident in what it is that I am delivering. And you're not worried about everybody else, right? So you're just like, I am confident in what I am doing.
I can't help myself because I think Jay used the word that like boils this whole thing down. And that word was compare. So compare, what happens more often than not, people are comparing themselves to someone, not a metric. If you compare yourself to someone, all you seek is emulation. That is all you seek. You do not seek growth. You do not seek improvement. You seek to emulate others. And that is like the biggest sin one can have. You were given identity. Use it. Find metrics. Go after metrics. Go after improvement from a known metric, not a person. Like you will never be someone else. You can't. And if you do, by some miracle of God, achieve that, what service have you done for yourself? Absolutely none, because you are no longer you. But
I'm not a really big religion guy. Some of you guys may be able to check me on this, but I do believe envy is one of the deadly sins, is it not?
Yeah, if your eyes deceive you, cut them out. If your tongue betrays you, cut it out. Things
Right.
of that nature. Also, for my God-fearing folk out there, God has already appointed you. God defines you. Your occupation and whatnot does not define you. I forget the exact verse that I was thinking about the other day where, oh goodness, I feel like I did a video on it or something. I can't remember, or about how God qualifies the called. He doesn't call the qualified. Let me say that again. God qualifies those who he calls. He doesn't call the already qualified. So, for my fellow believers out there, if you are doing something that he has called you to do, he has already qualified you to do it. And for you to go against that, and I hate to say it, but imposter syndrome starts to edge on you, kind of back talking God, and that doesn't work out too well for most folks. You know what I mean? So if you believe what I do, and I hope you do, maybe lean into that a little bit. Years ago, I was in an assistant manager position at a bank. Believe it or not, I was in corporate management for a little bit of time, and I did something fairly well. I don't even remember what it was. Doesn't matter. And my manager, KB, he He said, "Good job." And I looked at him. I said, "Thanks, KB. Just trying to be like you." And he looked at me, and I'll never forget this in my life. And the way he looked at me, he's like, "Man, I'm gonna stop you right there." He's an older gentleman. He's been around the block quite a while. He's got like that old man wisdom going on. And he said, "The world doesn't need another me. I'm already here. The world needs the best version of you. You're great. You were Tyler. You just do the best for you to be the best version of yourself, so you can go and serve the people best you can." And I'll never forget that. And let's see, it was about 2 years later that I did the ASP instructor curriculum, and they really drove that home. And some of the things I learned through there finally allowed me to be okay with who I was. And then we got to thinking and talking about if you are trying to be something for everyone, you end up being nothing to everyone. If you're trying to please everybody, you're just going to fail yourself. You're being untrue to who you really are. Just be who you are, help the ones that you can help, and just don't worry about the ones you can't. There's no way you're going to be able to please or serve literally everybody. It's just impossible. So don't forget, the good Lord has already qualified you for what you are doing. Lean into that and just try to be the best version of yourself. When you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, stop trying to figure out the version of you that you think everyone else sees, and just start looking in the mirror and seeing you for who you are and making a plan to be 1% better every day. It's as simple as that.
Now, I know that I can't please everybody, but I can piss off a lot of people at the same time.
Hallelujah.
I've seen it. I've been there. We got one more comment before we get out of here. So we a couple of episodes ago, we had a guest on here. His name was Alec. It's the show that's entitled what was it? Mr. Bad Grip Nick Lowen left.
Yep.
And so he said that left a comment, says self-awareness is really dope on paper, but self-image can jack that all the way up in practice, at least for me. I was thinking about this comment when Chris was talking about objective measurements and not being so outcome oriented, but more process oriented. Is that what Alec needs right here in order for him to help out his self-image? I think
I know Alec very well, and I do a fair amount of coaching with him. He's one of my favorite students, and Alec has self-awareness in spades. He does not have self-acceptance, and I would absolutely tell that to him to his face. He has not accepted. He hasn't accepted everything, and I actually think he's doing a little bit of what Tyler's talking about a little bit ago, of trying to be too much to too many people, and instead of just making himself another % better tomorrow. So, Alec, if you're listening, take that to heart, buddy.
Yeah. So Karen had a really good comment. Best advice I ever got: when you try to make everyone happy, the only one unhappy is you. That's deep. So that's deep. So this weekend, we're hosting Gabe White over at Top Gun Memphis. Shameless plug, totally shameless, right? And of course, the issue that everybody has in Gabe's class is Gabe has 16, but more realistically, like 20 hours of really excellent coaching. His safety brief might be well worth the cost of admission. And all the movement that he does, everybody that does all the movement and all of the man-on-man stuff and all of the, using of cover and things like that, the Rule 4 drill, all of that stuff is really, really good stuff. And a lot of times, it's the first time that people have an opportunity to do movement with a loaded gun in their hand, because They haven't been to matches yet. They don't feel confident. A lot of imposter syndrome. However, that's not what everybody thinks about when they think about Gabe's class. All they think about is the damn pins. Man, I want a turbo pen. I want a dark pen. I want a whatever, right? And so, okay, realistically, if you get all the time that's invested into the pens, you're really only looking at maybe 20% of the class. So you're going to pay what, $700 for this little trinket that realistically only costs them so much. Now, it does reward excellence, and that's excellent. I think that's wonderful. I think that's fantastic. However, I think people get into it for the wrong reasons, and they're holding other people's metrics in place of their own, and they're trying to be like Gabe instead of trying to be the best person that they are. And they'll go to Scott's class, Scott Jelinski's class, trying to get a dark pen, a black belt patch. They'll go to Brian Hill's class to try to get a black belt patch. They'll try to go to a match, and they'll try to get, GM classifiers. They're trying to be all these people except for themselves. So
it's bragging rights.
I don't know. Is it? Because I feel like it's more validation.
It sure is, right? Because you get to say, I got this, right? You don't, right? Well, I did this. You didn't, right?
Yeah, the best story I can tell about Gabe's class in particular, PSS. So a couple years back, I went to go take PSS, and it was while I was, well, you guys know, but I'm bionic. I mean, I have more parts from outside of me than I was kind of born with at this point. But when I went to go take PSS, I had gotten neck surgery, I want to say roughly 30 hours before the class started. And what I found most profound about that is I was unable to perform at a level that I wanted to perform at. It was just a physical impossibility. But what it allowed me to do in that class was to go to the class to learn. Because, performing to validate or something like that it just wasn't going to happen. I ended up shooting the class strong hand only, but I learned more from that event than probably 20, 30 classes before that, because I didn't have that burden of performance kind of lying over me. I accepted it and just went into, I'm going to soak up mentally as much as I can from this endeavor, versus going in and saying, well, if I crap the bed on this first bill drill, my turbo pin hopes are gone. And then you would just disengage for the class. You may be physically present, but are you really present in the environment? And it was profound. That was a big learning experience for me, that if I could shed that or expel that from my thinking, now I'm actually getting what I paid for, not just the opportunity to go shoot a couple drills.
Let me touch base on that. I actually have, you were talking about standards and whatnot. I actually have the black ant patch from Brian Hill, the brown ant, the accurate ant, and the instructor one, and the Top Shot Award and all that stuff. I had to dig through this big drawer down here to find it, not because I don't find these valuable, and I don't mean any disrespect to Brian. He's a great friend.
Not to cut you off, but you got all those in the same class.
No, I got the black ant at a class I AI'd for him here recently. I only got the brown one in the deliberate coaching. Missed it by like, I think 1 or 2%.
That's still pretty
Anyway.
badass. Just bragging on you.
Thank you. And I'm proud of it. But let me give y'all a little, or the viewers, y'all know this, the viewers, a little bit of free information here, a little free milk. If you will start looking at your goals and your achievements as milestones and not destinations, you will find much more joy in the process. And this all boils down to a lack of joy in the process. Like we keep chasing this carrot on the treadmill. And every once in a while we finally get it and we're like, aha. And then like 3 other carrots appear at the end of it. You're like, oh crap, I got to keep going. Well, dagnabbit. enjoy your carrot and know that you got it because of the hard work you did. All right. Again, it's just a milestone. These little trinkets that you can earn are just milestones saying, hey, man, my hard work has paid off. Cool. Now it's time to go back to the same old of being 1% better tomorrow. But again, man, goals are just milestones, not destinations.
I think I think to add to that just a little bit, Tyler, I think, where some folks struggle is I'm validated in Brian Hill's eyes or Scott Genelinsky's eyes or Rangemaster or whoever's eyes that they're in or Gabe White. And what they really struggle to do is realize that not very many people can shoot like Gabe White can. And not very many people can hit the standards that Brian Hill has set. And so they measure themselves by that. And I actually going all the way back to imposter syndrome, I think that's where sometimes that might sneak in, that I can't perform to that level of all of those other folks. So I must be an imposter and I don't belong. And I think where folks fall off of all of this, where potentially they could correct all of this, is to go out and say, listen, I want to be better at this. And if you want to use Gabe White's standards, those are great ones, right? But if you go figure out what your numbers are, so that you can be 1% better tomorrow or 10% better by the end of the month or whatever, that's the missing piece to most people's puzzle, is they don't know what their own math is. So they don't know that they're getting better, and they can't come up with a process to put in place, or whatever. So, I mean, you guys all probably do some significant one-on-one coaching, and as well as I do, the first thing that you got to do is figure out where the student is. And most folks don't figure out where they are. They just know where they want to be. And so yeah, it's the destination that they're looking to get to, but they don't have a roadmap to get to it. And then all of a sudden they feel like they don't belong.
So
that is one positive of some of these trinkets. It gives people a roadmap, but yeah.
The thing, Tyler said it really well. The thing about the trinkets, whatever they happen to be, is they are physical manifestations that you can hold that show work that you did. Right? It's a physical thing that you can hold, or you can look at on the wall and say, I did this work and got this thing. Right? It's a microcosm of the Olympics, right? You look at Simone Biles, right? You look at Katie Ledecky, right? These are people who are the best in the world at things. They're generational level talents, or even better than generational level talents. You look at Simone Biles, they had to create a new scoring system at the Olympics for her. And she's the only one that they use it for. That's ridiculous. That is, she's one of the 10 toes of God, for goodness sake. She's as good at a thing as a human can be. Her golds, those aren't an end state for her, but they're a physical manifestation of something that she has worked incredibly hard at. And she can keep collecting them, and she can keep hanging them on her wall until she's an old lady. And that's fantastic. And I hope she does. But she's not looking at the Olympic gold medals or the world championship gold medals. She doesn't look at that as any kind of end state or an end achievement. It is a milestone, like Tyler said. Tyler said that really well. Appreciating the milestones along the way and having those little physical manifestations, those little sort of extrinsic motivators to show us that we have something more than just numbers that we jot down in our training book, or more than just, hey man, I met this metric today in my practice session, so that my coach, my mentor, my Chris Bean or my Tyler or my Memphis can be proud of me for a couple of minutes before they go on with their day. It's fine to have these things, to work towards a black belt patch from Brian or from Scott, or a turbo or dark pin from Gabe or whatever. it's fine to have these things. They're little motivators to show you that you have put in the miles. It's not just the callus on your Glock knuckle, and the ache in your support hand at the end of your dry fire session, or all the brass that you pick up off your range. There's a nice, pretty motivator there that says, I did this work. That's how I look at trinkets.
I feel a lot better about my trinkets now.
Good, you should. You put in the work.
Nah, yeah. So, no, I busted my ass for that stuff, and, okay. All right. I got to tell it. Okay. So, a couple years ago, I did this thing, right? Went to a Gabe class and I did it really well. I was like, okay, well, and of course people have kept asking, right? Because everybody asks, hey, Memphis, you're going to get a turbo pin? We're going to get a light pin today or whatever have you. And I'm like, dude, I have to force myself not to care, right? Because yeah, it's cool. It's a really good goal, but I'm really more concerned about this one mental hurdle that I've been going through. And the mental hurdle is that when I really, really, really get fast, when I really start, like the wheels start to fall off, I outrun my headlights and I don't exercise enough visual patience. Okay. And it's hard for me to see my sights at speed. I want to apply so much pressure that I can hear my ear pro. I can hear my heartbeat beating through my ear pro, right? And through that pressure, I still want to be able to focus on the process. That's really what I get out of Gabe White's class. I got 16 people staring at me. A lot of those people are mentors. And it's like, all right, this is the one chance that I have to perform. I want to be able to see my sights there. And yeah, it happened. I got a turbo pin and that was cool. But what really got me cool was, and it was almost a point of shock. I was almost kind of surprised that I got it. Gabe gave me a really big hug because he had been there through the years and he saw how much I have been working for this. And I almost didn't believe that it happened. I was just kind of like, oh, wow, this is really cool. It wasn't that I got the turbo pin. The very next thought that I got right after that was, okay, what's next? Like, how many more of these runs can I get? How long can I hang on? How long can I ride this wave? Right. And it's hard because, yeah, I saw my sights on that thing. And it's like, in order for me to obtain that metric, you have to decide, okay, how am I going to be disciplined enough to go for the next goal? Having my son, it's kind of changed a lot of perspectives for me. When my son grows up, he's never going to know. He probably won't even care what a turbo pin is or whatever, like master classification, whatever have you. Like my goals have really kind of changed. I really don't really care too much about like some of this shooting stuff. I do because it's fun. It's a place for me to like zone in and focus. But the real thing is just, I want to be able to come home. Like, I want to get off the streets of Memphis and come home. Like, my wife deserves her husband. My son deserves his dad. And, I think sometimes we kind of forget that's what it's all about. Or maybe for some people that they're not living in that world and that's not what it's all about. I think the main thing that I really get out of this episode and that I get from everybody here is that, no matter what our goals are and no matter where we want to be and no matter the kind of person that we want to be and the kind of person that we see each other as, that we see ourselves are, I think it's important that we define that for ourselves and not have someone else define that for us. I think that's where the imposter syndrome comes from. So we got all these other standards that everybody else has, and we're trying to meet their standard. I don't know, man.
What?
On the standard I got, I just want to be a good dad, man. I want to come home.
It's look, I think reframing that instead of looking at it as everybody else's standard, as just looking at it as, you know, a milestone I'm passing on the way to wherever I want to get to. You know, that's you know, for me personally, I had a big one today, right? My son left for college, so that was, you know, kind of a, you know, big thing where, you know, when I think about my son, most of the time I think about this kid right here who's 5. You know, I think about him at this size, and you know, but the fact of the matter is, it's this kid right here, you know, who's, you know, 6 foot tall and 18 years old. And a buddy of mine commented on the on a post that I made about it, and said, you know, he said, life is short and life is long, but not in that order. And that was a real interesting quote to me, that it just keeps getting faster and faster. Everybody feels it.
Oh yeah.
But the
You know,
things that we get, the things that we do along the way here, the accolades that we get, the trinkets that we get, the value that we get out of doing this with each other and sharing the information that we have with the public, that we had, the public that we collectively have. This is also worthwhile, but it's just a milestone. All of it, every single bit of this is just an enjoyable thing to look at and to hold on to for the moments that we have them. And, you know, everybody's going to branch off and go in different directions and achieve different things. And that's all great. But there's nothing wrong with celebrating hitting certain points, whatever those points happen to be.
Yeah. Can I reframe too? And Memphis I'm going to try and not get emotional about this, but when people talk about like family, things like that, it kind of tugs at my heartstrings pretty hard. But here is what I think, whatever endeavor someone chooses to pursue. And I think about this because this is what I've told my son. My son cares nothing. My son's 21 years old, cares nothing about shooting, guns, business, any of the things that I've chosen to pursue in my life. None of it, zero. But what all of these things, these accolades or these achievements, for however you want to frame it, what has been useful in that regard is because I can tangibly show him something and say, here is something for you to chew on, son. I have proven over the course of my life that I can commit wholeheartedly to something, develop my self-discipline, pursue my dreams, and become arguably, by some metric, the best in the world at many, many, many things, whatever I care to pursue. There's value there. He will never understand what, you know, doing an inhumanly fast thing from concealment. He will never understand that. But he will see and understand that I can commit to it. And that's all I can ask for as a father, that by some way I showed an example that if you want something, nothing can stop you from attaining it. It just takes work. That's all you have to do. So that's just kind of something to think about from a parental standpoint. And I think where it's not done enough. We think about the things, not what the things mean, right? But anyway, I'm glad I got through that without like starting to choke up.
I love you guys.
All right. Well, it's after 9, so we should probably throw parting shots.
Yeah. So
Tyler's doing airplane hand and arm signals.
Tyler.
Oh, you said shots. I was doing the shots thing.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I'm sorry. That's not my generation of music. Sorry.
Oh yeah, but you got to be above 1975.
Hey, Memphis, I saw that quick cut there. I saw that quick cut.
Oh man.
Memphis over here trying to keep it family friendly.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah,
So
let's get
happy
some
to
hard
see
shots
most of
here.
y'all soon.
Memphis would be the one saying, "Don't make me turn this car around."
I'll be the one driving. I don't know. Maybe he'll drive some. Who knows?
Yeah.
What's
So
coming up in your world, Tyler?
yeah.
Yeah, well, let's see here. In 17 or so days, I'll be picking up Mikos, and we're going to head up to beautiful Manhattan, Kansas for the ASS conference. And then we're going to boogie on back, and I got a 2-day SWAT class to teach. And then I'll be going to the Guardian conference, teaching rifle stuff over there. And yeah, still looking for law enforcement contracts, training options. If you want to host, please hit up the website. That's really all I got coming up. Some conferences and some family time. Hopefully after that in deer season. That's about it.
So Dan, what you got going on in your world? What you got coming up?
So September is pretty busy for me. I'm teaching a private class up in New York State. And then when I come back from that, I'll also be heading out to the Guardian conference. So I'm going to drive down to Georgia and jump in the car with Chris. And then we're going to go hang out with Tyler, and whoever else is all going to be out there at the Guardian. And in October, I've got a couple things in October, and then November 16th, I believe it is, I've got a low light class that's going to go at Apache. And then, like Tyler said, we got deer season, and then right before the holidays, maybe go back to Georgia, hit up my boy James Bear, and go hog hunting again.
Man, that sounds like a great time. Told James, I said, hey. Alrighty, so I guess I'll go next because we're going like this way on the screen. So let's see. Tomorrow I have I'm teaching the Dry Fire Basics webinar. If you're an alumni of Memphis Beach Coaching, you get 50% off because I want you to dry fire. This coming weekend, we have Gabe White. We're hosting him at Top Gun Memphis. That's this coming weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Next weekend, which is the 24th and 25th, we're hosting Brian Hill, the Inner Game of Shooting, and that's going to be pretty awesome. Let's see. After that, the first weekend in September, me and Tyler are heading up to Manhattan, Kansas to hang out with Neil Widener and Christopher Bean, and we're going to be doing the the Active Self-Protection National Conference, and I'm so incredibly stoked for that. So that's going to be a great time. And what else? I think that's it. Oh yeah, also if you're in Memphis on September, the third weekend in September, the 21st, I'm going to be teaching a class called Mastering the Pistol, which is essentially adding speed and pressure into your practice regimen for defensive practitioners. So Mastering the Pistol. It's a pretentious name, but it fills classes, so let's do it, right? Alrighty. So Neil, what do you have coming up?
Well, you guys have already kind of stole my thunder. We've got the ASP National Conference coming up here in Manhattan, Kansas. It's probably my favorite weekend of the year, mostly because I get to see all of my friends. And I get to do what I love to do, but it's all in support. It's 100% of the money goes to the Flint Hills Foster Teen Camps, which I volunteered at a couple of times this summer and actually got to see where this money is going, and what it is to support. And I'm all in even more than I probably was before on that. For those of you that haven't been or that have been there before, I spent all of last week down there in a skid steer working on the roads, so you can actually drive in there now without bonding them out. And hopefully nobody's going to leave a muffler there this year. But it's a beautiful property. They've been working their tail off to get everything ready for us. And Cody went with me, Catherine, but he will be there as well. So it's going to be a little different this year because we had to change the date. They've had some leadership changes there at the camp, and so life's going to be a little bit different. But we're going to just lean into the weirdness and have fun with it, and raise some money for these kids because they absolutely need it. After that, we've got a class in Parma in Ohio in October that John and I are going out to teach. And in what is it? No, that's I'm sorry. Yeah, that's in October. In August, here in next weekend, Chris and I are actually going to Portland to teach a class there. There's a couple open spots in that. I think there's only 2 left on that one, and that one's going to be completely sold out. So if somebody's watching and wants to come to Portland and hang out with Chris and I and John for our evidence-based pistol skills, that's coming up as well. And then, like everybody else, hunting season's coming up. I haven't bird hunted for the last few years, so I'm pretty excited to get back into that. Got a bunch of friends coming to South Dakota, and we're going to shoot birds. So that's the rest of my year.
All righty. So Jay, are you shooting birds this weekend or are you anytime soon?
No.
Let us know what's going on in your world and where our viewers can see you and meet you and train with you.
Yeah, so what do we got coming up? This weekend we got coming up our functional carry class, and I kind of alluded to that at the beginning of this portion, just creating a space for you to come out with your carry gear, right? Let's run it, let's train it, let's see how it works, let's put it through some stress tests, let's see if it's actually a viable, option for you to run, or maybe there's some changes you need to make to your carry gear. So we got that coming. The week after that, we got our Maryland concealed carry, or wear and carry as we like to call it because we're weird. We got that class going on. So if you're in need of your concealed carry permit, check out sinistrumtraining.com and we'll get you squared away on that. And all of our concealed carry classes come with a free private lesson because I give a shit. And I want to make sure that you have a really great foundation on your journey towards firearms craft, and you have a good foundation and whatnot. After that, September, we got another concealed carry class coming up, and we got our starting carbine class coming up. So if you are a new carbine owner on the AR-15 platform, this is the class for you. We're going to do a deep dive in it, right? Break it down, functions, safety, how to shoot it, right? Shoulder it, positions, all that stuff. So we definitely have some options for you in that. But yeah, definitely trying to make it out to some classes and whatnot. So I'm looking at options there, might be hopping in on that. But yeah, if you're in the Maryland or DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, check out sinistrumtraining.com. Shoot me an email and let's train.
This dude's got some fire lives on Instagram as well. He does pretty good there.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So, Chris, you want to round us off?
Oh yeah, I got some big news for everybody. So, first things first, my September or end of August, like Neil said, I'll be in Portland, Oregon, teaching with ASP, some of my favorite people on the planet to work with, and that's at my old home range, Tri-County Gun Range. Then getting into September, we've got the ASP conference benefiting the Flint Hills Foster Teen Camp. I'll be herding cats at the Guardian conference, doing a lot of customer engagement stuff there, trying to help facilitate some instructor stuff there. But the big news I have, and this is going to blow your guys' mind first, but as of like 2 or 3 days ago, the Tactical ADV website is actually live. So tacticaladv.com still needs some polishing, but the website is actually up in internet land. But the big news I have for everybody, if anyone's really still watching now, is as I talked earlier in the podcast about pursuing dreams, things like that. I have, in the past week or so decided to retire from corporate America and go into teaching full time. So that's a huge step for me and a bunch of risk for me, but it's time. So a couple things that we offer, if you go to our website, I have my 2 flagship courses are Practice for Mastery and Deductive Pistol Craft. Both of those are related to how I've gone from, the start to relatively high level of skill in creating a roadmap, metric-based roadmap to help you get where you want to go. Also going to be doing one-on-ones and what I've always done with virtual coaching and mental management, direct virtual coaching. All of those things are available for anyone that's interested in working with me or learning more about what I do. What I will say is I'm probably a little bit different than what you're used to, but the results are proven. So if anyone's interested in that, please reach out, tacticaladv@gmail.com or the website, and let me know how I can help. Oh, you know what? The other thing too, in October, I think sometime in October, I'll be down at Apache in North Carolina, working with Riley Bowman during one of his pistol intelligence classes.
That's great. I knew I was forgetting something. Thanks, Chris.
Dan, are you going to be there with that?
Yeah, I'm hosting that class and helping Chris and Riley. Didn't I text you that earlier today, Jay?
You did. I just didn't know if you were going to be there too.
Yeah, I'll be there.
And I definitely didn't know that Chris was going to be there though. So Chris, thanks for telling me that. I appreciate that.
It's a secret. Well, it was. I kind of blew it.
Eyes.
Well, all right then.
So, guys, I think it's a good time to wrap it up. Wow. I'm so grateful for every single one of these episodes that we have here. But more importantly, I want to thank our esteemed guests. We had Jay White, we had Neil Widener, and Gabe White had to leave a little bit earlier. But if he looks back at the replay, I hope he understands just how much his presence here was appreciated. And the same thing to you, Neil and Jay. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Guys, this is really cool. Like, I wish I had the words to say how cool this is.
You can just give me a hug when you get to Kansas. How's that? Is that fair?
Done.
All right.
Yeah. Awesome. Alrighty, folks. Well, thanks again and see you soon.